Hey, Richard here. In this video, I'm going to tell you 3 reasons why and exactly when you should sell your stock. The reason it's important to know when you should sell your stock is at the heart of this commenter's question. He says, I always find it frustrating to sell a stock after a few years and then find that it continues to go up. Any general guidelines? He also asks, same goes for when you buy a stock and then it goes down, say 20%. At what point do you acknowledge you made a mistake and that it's time to bail on the decision? So yes, this video will certainly answer these questions, and there's also a few other important things that you're going to want to stay until the end of this video for, you're not going to want to miss. By the way, if you're new here watching this, my name is Richard Hopkins and I love investing. I've spent the last 3 years studying everything I could about stock investing from the world's best investors, starting with Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. So if you're interested in the stock market and making money in the stock market intelligently, then subscribe now because I put out a new video every week. So let's start off with a little story for you. The company Apple IPO'd in 1980, and anyone who invested back in 1980 and held onto those shares until today would be very, very rich right now. However, between 1980 and now, those shareholders would have had to experience a couple 80% drops and multiple 20%, 30%, and 40% drops over the years. Yet if they had just held on, their money would have increased by 90,000%. That would mean a $10,000 investment back in 1980 turning into about $9 million today. And the biggest obstacle in their way of achieving this was simply just having the stomach to hold on for the ride. Now check this out. There was a study done by this company called Dalbar that does these types of studies. They found that over the period that they were looking at, the average mutual fund produced 13.8% annual returns. However, the average investor in those mutual funds only earned 7% annually. Why would that be? Was it because of fees? Nope. Here's the reason why. Investors were chasing returns. If their fund had a bad year, they'd pull that money out and they'd put it into a fund that just finished having a great year. Here's another crazy example. You may have heard of the famous investor Peter Lynch. He famously achieved an average annual rate of return of 29% over a 13-year period with his fund called the Magellan Fund. But did you know that the average investor in that fund actually lost money? That's right, and it's for the same reason. People getting scared when the price has gone down, or even just bored when it hasn't changed lately, and they end up selling at the exact worst time. And then later, the fear of missing out sets in, and everybody else is getting rich but me, and you see the headlines of how much stocks are going up, and everybody's buying, and you end up buying at the exact worst time. So what's the lesson here? Well, it's to not chase returns, and it's to not make decisions solely based on price action. Here's one last important thing to note on the subject of jumping in and out from Charlie Munger. Charlie Munger has said that if you buy and you hold on for 20 years, as opposed to jumping in and out, that it means that you only have to pay taxes once. And according to his estimates, this equates to earning an additional 1 to 3% per year. And if you know how compounding works, then you already know the massive difference that compounding your money at even just 1 additional percentage point can make. So I am going to tell you the 3 reasons where selling your stock can make sense. However, before we can talk about selling, we need to first cover how you went about buying your stock in the first place. And yes, it is directly related to reason number 1 as well. So I'm currently part of a bunch of stock investing Facebook groups. And in those groups, I see a lot of posts from people asking for stock recommendations, and also a lot of people giving their stock recommendations. And those posts, by the way, by far get the most activity. People seem to love stock tips, and people also seem to love giving their stock tips. And it makes sense why people would be so eager to recommend the stocks that they already own, because if their promotion causes more people to buy it, it will cause the price of that stock to go up, at least in the short term. The classic pump and dump scheme is when someone buys a stock and then they go around the internet spreading it, recommending it in different Facebook groups and forums, stirring up a bunch of hype and causing a bunch of inexperienced investors to go buy it up in hopes of making quick money. And all this buying causes the price to go up, which encourages even more buying. So that's the pump. And then eventually the original person, now that the price is very inflated, sells out of all their shares. That's the dump. And this is usually at the detriment to everyone else still sitting holding those shares and wondering why the price has dropped and what should I do now and when should I sell this. So if the way you came about buying the stock that you own was from a random tip, then you might be participating in a pump and dump, even if it's not a maliciously motivated one and planned out one like I just described. Honestly, sometimes the whole stock market can just be one big pump and dump. But if this is you right now, my suggestion would be to do some research into what you actually own and what you think it's worth. Look at some financial reports and do some critical thinking. And also try to calculate what sort of annual returns you think you could expect from your investments. Go check out some of these other videos on my channel if you want to learn more about what I'm talking about here. But if you're just straight up gambling and calling it investing, I I really can't help you. Okay, so finally, let's get into it. Here's the first of the 3 reasons of when you should sell your stock, and it relates to what we were just saying. You can sell your stock if you find a better investment opportunity where that money would be better allocated. Meaning, if your money is currently sitting in an investment that you expect will generate you an annual rate of return of 5%, but then you find another investment that you expect will generate you a 15% annual rate of return, then moving your money from your 5% ROI investment to your 15% ROI investment opportunity would be one reason to sell. You might still like that original investment, but you just like this new one better. So you're reallocating your money to where it's going to give you the highest return. This is different, by the way, from chasing returns that we talked about earlier. Chasing returns would mean you're moving your money based on past performance and recent price action. What I'm talking about here is reallocating your money to where it'll give you the highest return based on your calculations and estimations of the stock's intrinsic value. Reason number 2 to sell a stock would be if you discover that the premise and fundamentals that you believe to be true when you bought the business are no longer accurate, or that you are just wrong. For example, Warren Buffett sold all of his airline stocks back in March and April of 2020 when the fundamentals of global air travel just simply changed. He had to reevaluate how the change in air travel habits would affect the airline industry in the long term. How long would it be until air travel was back to business as usual? Would it take years? Are we now living in a world where every 5 to 10 years this thing happens again and air travel needs to be temporarily halted again and again? The business fundamentals changed, and this caused him to have to recalculate the intrinsic value of the airline businesses that he owned and conclude that he didn't want to own them anymore. So he sold them. Sometimes it can be a change in technology, or you could just realize that the competitive advantage wasn't as strong as you thought it was. Reason number 3 to sell a stock is if the management of the business changes or does something you just don't agree with. Here's the best example of that. I'll show it to you. It's an absolutely incredible story.
I don't mind telling you the name. Well, actually, maybe I should. It's a company that at one time in Brazil was the largest processor of chickens in the world. The company was called Sadia. And I went to visit them in Sao Paulo because this company not only they produced chicken for the local market, but they also sold the vast majority of the breasts and other good components of the chicken to markets in the Middle East, in Russia and elsewhere. They generated a great deal of foreign income, foreign exchange. They had their own, they grew their own wheat to feed, they made their own chicken feed. They were exceptional, and there was the second generation. And one day I went to visit, and we owned a stake in it. And I visited with the CFO. The patriarch in the family was absent. He was not there, and it was sad because I wanted to meet him. The CFO said, he says, if we had the ability to have access to the banking system so that we can hedge our receivables from various countries, and we can, this was 2000 something, we can make more money by being able to foresee, because we can foresee foreign exchange rates. Only if we could work with an institution that would work with us in the forward market. And the CFO insisted on telling me, spending 15 minutes telling me about this thing that had nothing to do with chickens.
Right.
So I noted it. 2 years later, it's in the news, Sadia buys a 60% stake in a bank in Brazil. Within 30 minutes, our entire stake was sold.
Right.
Just on that announcement alone.
Yep.
Within 2 years, the company was insolvent, out of business.
Wild, right? Yeah, that one really blew me away. So yeah, there's different things that could happen that could trigger in your mind, wait a second, I don't like the direction that the management's going with this. Or you might conclude that they're making low integrity decisions and that you just don't agree with, or decisions that are just not in the best interest of the shareholder. One easy way to tell that management is not acting in the best interest of shareholders would be if you see that they've bought back shares at a time when their share price was overvalued, or if they've issued new shares at a time that their share price was undervalued. This would be a big warning sign that the management simply just does not understand basic capital allocation, and this should be taken as a strong signal to stay away from investing in that company. If you want to become an even better investor, this is the next video for you to watch right over here. This week's video, by the way, came from a question in the comments. So if you're watching this video right now and you have a question, put it down in the comments and I promise I'll do my best to respond to every one of those and maybe even make a video that covers it as well. This one next.